All right, well, welcome into the Cris Collinsworth podcast here with Eric Eager, the guru of all things football and analytics and math and science, and he's going to, invent things and all that kind of stuff. But right now, you've got a much tougher assignment. You got to try and milk my mock draft here so that I don't say anything completely foolish. I'm up to, so I legitimately spent probably an hour and a half on 55 players. And now I'm down to the bottom end of the first round, and I'm out of players. I don't like any of the ones I got left. And that's not true. Now that I'm starting to look through it a little bit, I've found a few more guys. But they don't always match up, right? And we were just talking about, like, do you do the draft what you think they're going to do? Do you do what you think are the best players available at that point? How do you approach this thing?
I mean, from my perspective, as somebody who's trying to help people make good bets and stuff, I really try to think about what they will do. Like the hardest part is, to bet the draft, you have to understand what they will do. But to sort of analyze the draft, you also have to have an opinion about these players, right? And the hardest thing, and I think that the thing that I, as I talk to teams and people within staffs and stuff, I think that the biggest thing is there's so many differences between where these teams' big boards are. Like I talked to somebody last year who said that Justin Fields was a 3rd round prospect, right? Like, 2 rounds off of where he ends up going. And then you obviously have the Vegas Raiders taking Clelin Ferrell at 4 one year, then Alex Leatherwood last year, and so I think as an exercise, I think you start with kind of trying to sort of get, like you said, 50 players that you think will go in the first round, but then ultimately you try to see how things fit. And the funniest thing, we did the podcast with George and we did a live mock. When these players don't fit, the fans will let you know. I picked Tyler Linderbaum to the Bucks, thinking Jensen's a little older and stuff, and I got crushed because he's not a great scheme fit or whatever. And it's like, okay, all right, fine. We have to go back and read a little bit more. And so it's a tough exercise. And generally speaking, like if you get a third of these picks right, you're probably going to be in the top. A third?
I'd like to get 5 or 6 right.
You're going to be in the top.
Because once you're wrong at the top, which everybody's going to be in this draft, then you're wrong throughout, So you almost have to, if you were going to have a hit 12 right, you would have to hit pretty much the first 5, bango, which last year was a little easier to do, right?
Because you kind of knew before the draft 1, 2, 4, and 5, right? You basically knew what those picks were going to be. Especially when Jamar Chase showed up to the draft wearing Bengals colored shoes, you kind of knew what that was going to look like. But then, pick 3 had the uncertainty. And then later on, I mean, think about this last year, Patrick. So I think about like Sauce Gardner versus Derek Stingley, right? The whole draft process last year, Patrick Surtain Jr. was thought of as like the favorite to be the first corner taken. And he isn't even the first. Like J.C. Horn ends up being not only the first corner taken, but the first defensive player taken, which was supposed to be Parsons. And like so you just, like you said, it cascades from there. Maybe that's why you should sort of pair teams with players. But even then, like what happens when some team makes a trade? Then the whole thing becomes a little bit obsolete.
I know. So we're not going to get it right, but we'll have some fun discussing this thing. So. There's all kinds of interesting jump-off points here. Number 1 pick, it could be anybody. I mean, there's like 4 guys still that very much in the hunt here. And then when does the first quarterback go? Does Detroit take a quarterback? Which of those 2 cornerbacks go first, right? Mm-hmm. Stingley, is it Sauce? Is it, And then the offensive linemen, I've got ranked completely out of order that everybody else is talking about them. And I don't get it. Like I'm watching I don't know if people just make predictions and they do it based on what they're hearing or if they've actually watched the tape or, but even Jacksonville, I'm hearing Ike Ekwonu might be the first overall pick. Yeah. I'm like, what? Like never would he be my first overall pick in this draft. So
I think a lot of that is anchoring, right? So we were at the combine, right? And at the combine, before Cam Robinson signed his franchise tag, it was Evan Neal's the favorite. Evan Neal's the favorite. Evan Neal's the favorite. And then eventually some people started saying they like Ike Ekwonu better for some, like, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me why Ekwonu would be better than Neal.
He can't pass protect you. I think he's going to be a guard.
And he's like kind of smaller too. He has longer arms than Neal, but he's smaller than Neal from a physical standpoint.
But Neal, Evan Neal, we're going to get in the weeds here, and I don't want to. I want to get started. But Evan Neal, to me, is like, he's played every guard. He played both tackle positions. He's been whatever.
Played in the SEC versus playing in the ACC, which is a lot harder, I think.
345 pounds. He's a guy that I think you leave him alone in one position for a couple of years. He could be. Now, you want to tell me he's going to be the first overall pick? I can see on the potential upside in the same way as Travon Walker, where that would be, if that's your thing, that could be the pick, So anyway, all right. So I'm going to go through some of these things, and it's going to get ugly right off the bat here because I know Aiden Hutchinson is the guy here at PFF, and everybody has done that, but now Travon Walker is the betting favorite, is my understanding of being the first.
Travon Walker is minus 225 to be the first overall pick per DraftKings. That's basically to bet it, you have to assume almost a 70% chance or so that he's going to go first overall, which is kind of crazy. This is, by the way, somebody last night I was on, VSiN, this is the 11th favorite to be the first overall pick since they opened this market. So, Sam Howell. Rattler,
I know Sam Howell started the whole thing.
Kayvon Thibodeau in December. Aiden Hutchinson's been the favorite twice. Neal has been the favorite, and now you get Travon Walker out of Georgia.
So let's talk about Travon Walker a little bit, because I think we've Aiden Hutchinson everybody to death. Like, everybody gets, and I'll give you a chance to tell what you like about him. I'm going to give you my honest to God first impression. So I started with Aiden Hutchinson, and it was a favorite. So I was like, and I go, he's just not quite the athlete I'm used to seeing with the first overall pick if you're going to go edge. Not that he's not a great player, not that he's not, and he works his tail off. He's going to end up with 10 sacks a year. It's all that kind of stuff. Then I went to Travon Walker, and I just kept watching the film, and I just kept watching it. And to some extent, it reminded me a little bit of Rashawn Gary, which I didn't see. There wasn't the stuff there for Rashawn Gary back in the day to go, that should be a high draft pick. And he wasn't. But then he went higher than what I thought he was, and now he's turned into a really nice
pretty good
player.
Pro.
Yeah. But I just look at, and I know Walker, all his numbers have been, everywhere. He's bigger than Hutchinson, this 272. He's got the long arms. He's got the vert. He's got the 4.51. He's making plays all over the field. They had this guy playing 1 technique, 3 technique, 5 technique, stand-up linebacker, running all over the field. If he were on a bad defense, like, really, if he were just on a bad defense and they would have just let him play middle linebacker and run, he would have been the freakiest guy we've ever seen in college football. But he was on maybe the greatest defense of all time, and I got the feeling that they just sort of plugged him in wherever, they had an injury or they had some need, whatever, and he still made a ton of plays, and he missed so many sacks. I mean, I just kept thinking, if they just left this kid on the edge or at the 3 technique or left him anywhere and just let him go to work, he would just be something. Then all of a sudden, everything kind of came back to me where the way I was thinking, and now he's the favorite. So,
yeah, the issue for me is, kind of the data. Like, we have so many data points here that, you can get out of the context sometimes, right? Like, you could look at his pressure rate, which is under 10%, right? It's like half of what Thibodeau's is. It's half of what Hutchinson's is. 34 pressures and 381 total pass rush snaps. The 5 sacks, like you said, if he misses sacks, he did have 7 pressures in the Alabama, in the title game, which is certainly something, doing great work against, sort of the best competition. The issue I have, I guess, is, historically, edge, you played wide receiver, hard position to predict. what quarterback's almost impossible, right? Year to year. Edge is like one of the more solved problems we have, right? Especially with PFF data, you have, does the guy have production? Does the guy have production against high level competition? Does the guy test well, right? Like if you don't check one of those two boxes, in my opinion, like it's really hard to make a case for you to be the first pick or a top pick. And that's why when you also look at like, there aren't that many like great edge players that are taken in round 3, 4, 5, 6. There's plenty of great wide receivers that are taken in rounds 3, 4, 5, and 6. Like this is the most efficient market from college to pro that we have in terms of, in terms of prediction. And so I think that the issue with Walker is not necessarily that he's going to be bad, right? I don't think that we've seen it with like Donnell Hunter had 14 pressures his last year at LSU. He's been a wonderful pro. He's taken in round 3. Walker, to me, the hard part is the opportunity cost of taking Walker is giving up on taking one of two, Thibodeau and Hutchinson, two players who check both of those boxes, both really not as athletic, but pretty athletic, and then extremely productive in college. I just wonder, and I guess like maybe you can shed some light on this. Like they'd have the league would still have to teach them how to rush the passer, right?
Agreed.
And so like
they'd have to teach Malik Willis how to play quarterback.
Well, yeah, and I think that that's one of the issues why the Willis thing too as well. Can you teach like a 22-year-old player to rush the passer?
I don't know, but I think you've hit on exactly what the point of this thing is. Like I don't think Aiden Hutchinson is going to get better. Like his dad was a great player. He got top end coaching. Harbaugh had professional people that knew.
Yep.
This kid was an afterthought. He was an afterthought at Georgia. He was a plug and play wherever we need somebody. Yep. And everywhere he played, he flashed. He played well. He did things that, and so when I started looking at him, I go, I don't know if he's going to be a better, interior rusher or edge rusher or maybe even a stand-up guy of some kind. I don't know, but there's enough there that is uncultivated at this point in his career and I think that's what they're going to see too. It's like my job as a GM is to not pick the best player out of college football. That's not my job. My job is to pick who is going to be the most impactful player at the pro level. And that's where I get stuck with Malik Willis a little bit too.
Yeah.
And not that he would go to Jacksonville, but when I start going to number 2, Detroit, I watched Detroit a lot last year by accident. They were playing teams.
And they were plucky. They played hard.
They were playing teams that I was watching the opponent of. And I go, man, these guys are tough as hell. I mean, they are beating people up. They are running over good defenses and being able to do it. And so when they started talking about, we just want a quarterback who can make big plays, and in my mind, big plays in their mind is more about runs, scrambles from the quarterback and throw it deep. Well, if you want somebody to do that, you can do that. The thing that Willis doesn't do that I would love an opportunity to coach him, like I watch him drop back and he looks like Matthew Stafford. Matthew Stafford like looks both ways, but Matthew Stafford's been doing it for 12 years and knows what he's doing. Yep. And he's got a purpose for doing it because he's trying to get that linebacker to move a little bit to throw in that backside slant to Cooper Kupp. Malik Willis is looking around because Matthew Stafford did it, not because he's learning anything. Matthew Stafford, Malik Willis needs to, for a little while, look at one half of the field, right? Yeah. Okay, we'll do a screen the other way so that you can't just get a beat on that. But he needs to look at that side safety and figure out what he's doing. Yeah. Maybe the cornerback, but just look at one thing and let's take this one step at a time, learn this, and then we'll go to step 2. Because everything I hear about him, he's a fantastic young guy. And if he could slowly develop, he has everything else. He makes throws from those wide hashes to the far out on the other side. I go, son of a gun, look at this guy.
As a runner, he led the nation in broken tackles. And there was just the story out today, I think, about how he has a relationship with like a team, like he's a great member. He's taken people in the community under his wing and like has really used his platform for good. Like he seems to be a very good person too, and a kind of guy like you think
everything
about,
I hear. Yeah,
you think about like what can overcome some deficiencies early, and what you're describing to me, like as a former professor, like this is a student who has watched you do something on the board and tries to copy everything without really understanding why, right? And to your point, you want to like limit the scope of what he has to do so he can really understand that. And then as Stafford's been in the league for a dozen years, kind of grow that thing. You brought something up interesting about the Jaguars, but also the Lions here, because I think that this is kind of why, we're going to see Walker at 1, and I don't think we're going to see Willis at 2, even though I think it's maybe a good idea for them. The incentives of the general manager are extremely important to understand here, right? For a guy like Trent Baalke, like I think Trent Baalke's reputation in the league is not that great, right? Because of the Niners thing. For him to pick a player that we all think is good, and for that player to be good, he's not going to get any credit for it. If he picks a player that we're all kind of like, really? And then the guy ends up being amazing, well, what happens to Trent Baalke's reputation if it goes up? Brad Holmes in Detroit, I think, even though Detroit didn't win a lot of games last year, I think all of us had a great deal of admiration for how they played. They covered the spread 60% of the time or so.
Let's get right down to it here.
They played hard. They went for the right fourth downs. Their process looks sound, right? And so Brad Holmes doesn't need a home run swing for us to still think the Detroit Lions are on the right path. They just need to get the ball on the green, right? And so I think that for that reason, I don't think they take Willis, even though I think if the goal for Detroit is to get as good as possible, as fast as possible, he's probably the best pick.
I agree. And I put it at 35%. I think there's a 35% chance that Malik Willis could end up being a really good quarterback in this league. Really good.
Which are good odds.
Right. That, to me, that's worth the bet over a pass rusher or a corner or whatever. If I were Detroit, I would do it. I would take him. Well, I did not pick him to Detroit, though, because I don't think they will. I think they'll take Aiden Hutchinson, because he'll fall to number 2, and they'll take him. But I would love to have Jared Goff as my quarterback in transition, right? And sort of, all right, let's watch, because, what he does is good, but he just doesn't have your body. He doesn't have your skill set. So let's watch that. Let's bring in a couple of packages for Malik Willis, and let's diversify an offense that really needs it. They need explosives. I understand what they're talking about. They don't have enough explosive kind of plays.
This team isn't that as good, but it's kind of like Alex Smith. Alex Smith was a former number 1 overall pick, had been through it, right? Patrick Mahomes sits behind him. Alex plays pretty well. Like, I think Jared Goff is kind of in that Alex Smith territory where he's a former number 1 overall pick, took a team to a Super Bowl, but it's limited, right? It could teach this a young player quite a bit. I think so. You go Hutch. So I think the cool thought experiment would be, because the Detroit Lions have the Rams pick at 32 because of the Goff trade. Would you rather have Aiden Hutchinson and like Matt Corral, or Malik Willis and like Arnold Ibakite? I think that's kind of the question mark as far as like if you go edge quarterback in round 1, does you've
totally hit on the why of why I didn't do it. The guy that I really like in this draft is Sam Howell. Okay. And I think I can get him at the top of the second round. I think you can
get him at 32. His draft prop is in like the 40s or 50s.
Yeah. I think somebody's going to take him before that, though. I really do. Depending on what happens. If Willis and Pickett are both gone, and I think they will be by the time we get to the end of the first round, I think we're going to see somebody start taking these quarterbacks. And I'm not so sure that Ritter and Howell aren't going to be better players than Pickett and Willis at the top end. I mean, I don't know. I would, for value of exactly what you're talking about, that's why I'm going to pass on Willis for him here, because I think they're going to fall in love with Sam Howell.
Yeah, I think, well, especially so much of what a quarterback does on his rookie deal, unless he's a Herbert type player, it's what you saw with Mac Jones, right? Mac Jones is not the best prospect last year, gets put in the best environment, has the best results last year. Like that, to your point, like Ritter could go to the best team and perform better than any of these other guys. And so that kind of flattens the curve a little bit.
All right, so I'm going Travon Walker, Aiden Hutchinson, 1-2. I hate myself for it, but I'm stuck in that no man land. Am I doing what I think they should do, or am I doing what I think will happen here? So you know how that goes. So now I'm going to go down to number 3, and you were just talking a little bit that maybe cornerback here and maybe a flip-flop on the cornerbacks. That I've got Evan Neal out of Alabama. I look at this team that, you know, they're going to have to find a quarterback at some point. The best way to recruit a quarterback is to have a good offensive line. I think Evan Neal, and we hit on it a little bit earlier, is tip of the iceberg of what he's going to be. Because he's just been moved around so much and have been asked to do all these different things. But for me, he's the best player, and that's what Houston should be looking for.
Yeah, there's also rumors that Houston's going to trade Laramie Tunsil. I think Tunsil, if you're a contending team and you're struggling at left tackle, Tunsil's contract is 2 years, $19 million, no guaranteed money. You know, so you're probably going to have to give up a bigger pick, right? So you think about a team like Kansas City, you might want to move on from Orlando Brown. But if they were to move on from Tunsil, then obviously Evan Neal makes a lot of sense here. They also pick at 13, which is you're not going to get one of the good tackles at 13. So but you might get a Trent, like let's say you want to go corner, probably could get Trent McDuffie at 13. So this to me is a very sound reasoning for a pick.
Yeah, I just think they have to start somewhere. I really like Lovie Smith too. Lovie Smith, if you're going to have a guy that has to rebuild something from scratch. He's a patient guy. He looks like a Bible character or something with the white beard now and the whole thing. So
rebuilt the Bears pretty well in the early 2000s.
Yeah, sure. He's a very laid back, fatherly kind of person. I think he'll do well down there. The Jets, I went Kayvon Thibodeau. I look at, you know, all the concerns of, you know, what he does off the field. I just think all that's BS. I really do. I look at this guy. I don't care. He's going to be in New York anyway. He's going to be tugged and pulled and like Odell Beckham was. And, you know, I think that I would probably put him on the phone with Odell and have Odell say, look, that's great. Take advantage of it, but don't let it overwhelm you. Yeah. You know, but this guy, I mean, he's been the best player since he was born, right? He come out of high school, it started until like an hour ago. He was the best player, and I think the Jets and Saleh, you know, they were, when you talk to the people with the 49ers, they preach one thing: we're going to have the best defensive line in football. Yeah. And then we're going to play coverage with a lot of people in behind that. Yeah. We're going to let those 4 guys go in. I as much as I want to think cornerback or anything else, I think that they are going to go to it.
And they have the 10th pick. There's rumors that they're going to use that on Deebo Samuel, which is kind of interesting. But at 4, like, look, these are the most famous of famous last words. But like, if the Jets don't get a huge haul in this draft, they will have made a mistake. There's so much available to them, and they're a team, Chris. I think if you look at their depth chart, they don't have a lot of holes. They need impact players at some spots, but they have NFL caliber players, all 22. So they need a player that can come in and change the complexion of the franchise. They can't do quarterback because they did it last year, but this is a player, second sort of more place. And then again at 10, you're going to have your pick of wide receivers. So the Jets, I think, are set up really nicely in this draft.
Well, and I think so. I've got 3 out of 4 edge players, and I started thinking about the psychology of all this, which you were talking about a little bit earlier. It's so much easier as a drafter of players to take an edge. You take a cornerback and he gives up the touchdown, people go, oh, your draft pick sucks. Yeah. If you take a left tackle and he gives up a sack, oh, your draft pick sucks. If you have an edge player that doesn't get a sack in a game, nobody's going, this guy sucks, right? Now, if he goes all year, that's one thing. But there's less pressure, I think, on edge rushers than any other position because all you're looking at is the upside.
Yeah. All you want, the positive things are few and far between, right? So the eye doesn't catch when they don't happen. You know, so like that's
exactly my point. All right, so now I'm going to start getting into the Giants and the Jets and all that kind of stuff. With, I personally think that playing offensive line in the NFL has nothing to do with being a mauler. Everybody wants to put on a highlight tape and show me somebody pancaking another guy. And I go, that doesn't matter. It just doesn't matter. That's like saying you're good at 4-foot jump shots.
That's exactly what
in the NBA.
We talked about. Like the offensive line is about preventing the bad things as opposed to the one great thing. Like it's the exact opposite of defensive line.
It absolutely is. So this isn't my favorite pass blocker in here, but I'm going to do. I think the Giants will take Charles Cross out of Mississippi State. Sauce Gardner would have been great for Wink Martindale, who I'm sure he's pounding the table for one of those two cornerbacks. But I just think that you have to give this offense a chance. And Charles Cross he's not going to overwhelm anybody. He's not a guy that you go, oh my God, look at what he did. He just stays in front of his guy all the time. He has great feet. He can move around. He has the ability to just stay in the way. And this is 2.5 second league. That's all we have. Yes. 2.5 seconds. Half the time I want to go, I can do that. I can stay in front of a guy for 2.5 seconds. And then, of course they go, no, you can't. But I think Cross is the safe play. I don't think he's going to get booed for taking him. And that's where I'd go.
This is the second. So in 2020, the Giants had the 4th pick. They took Andrew Thomas, who was our top tackle, was not the favorite to go top tackle. And he played pretty well last year. Charles Cross, our top tackle, they go that way again. The thing here is interesting. The Giants do need a corner. I think they end up trading James Bradbury before the week's over because of salary cap considerations. The thing with Carolina, they don't need a corner, right? So if you're the Giants, you pick 5 and 7, Carolina sandwiched between you. Without a trade, you're going to get a corner at 7. So you go ahead and take a tackle, a position of need for the Panthers first, and then get corner second.
Yeah,
if you want to do corner, I don't know if you have corner there, but that.
I'm going to get into my other offensive line guys here in a little bit, but I feel like I've got all those guys upside down, so I'm sure I'm wrong. But honestly, if I had to take one, if it were my pick, I would sit and wait on Kenyon Green. I think Kenyon Green out of Texas A&M has the whole thing. He's 323 pounds. Mm-hmm. He can move his feet. Now he grabs people. He does the bear hug stuff a little bit. Yeah. They don't call that in the NFL anymore. He's played every position other than center up and down that line. I think he's going to be one of the steals of this draft, but I don't think the Giants are going to draft Kenyon Green with the 5th pick because they get booed off the stage.
And there's a really good chance they could get him in the first half of round 2, I believe. So not a great chance, but a non-zero chance.
Yeah, I think he'll go in the top 15, 16 picks. If I am that wrong on him, I'm going to be really impressed with myself. All right, I'm trying to go through all my draft orders here. So now I took Cross to the Giants, Carolina Panthers. I just feel like Matt Rule is trapped. I don't know how he gets out of the trap. If they don't take a quarter, so if they don't trade back, that would be good. But nobody's going to trade up with them. If they don't, then their next pick's in the 4th round. You can't go in without a quarterback who's ready to play. And so you're almost reduced to Desmond Ridder, Kenny Pickett at this point. If you've got to plug and play a quarterback and have a chance, how many more years does Matt Rule get? Fitterer
games I think is the units of measurement here.
I mean, and is it the best way to go into it with this? I mean, the fact that they're sitting there right now without a quarterback, I feel like they've got to take Pickett.
I think the issue though is the quarterback is not going to save the marriage, right? Like we saw it last year with Matt Nagy and Ryan Pace and where they took, they traded up and were aggressive and took Justin Fields. Like that just doesn't save the marriage, right? Like the issue with the Panthers is if you roll and we again Tunsil's available in a trade, Mekhi Becton's available in a trade. The problem is the Panthers don't have the ammunition to trade for Laramie Tunsil's probably taking a 2nd round pick maybe, and you don't have one, right? You don't so to me the bet because if you take Pickett and you still have Cam Irving at left tackle, like you got no shot either, right? So I think that the problem is as you said, the Panthers have really no hope. I guess the issue for me would be taking Pickett first. He's kind of a no upside quarterback. He's kind of a very confined distribution. Willis to me would appear to be the one is, you're taking the long shot, roll of the dice here. So that would be my only objection.
But if you're Matt Rule, are you wanting to do that? Now Fitterer I could see wanting to do that. But if you're Matt Rule, are you going, I'm looking for 3 years out for a quarterback? I'm not. I'm like, I got to try and save my job because he's not getting back in the NFL
right.
if this doesn't work out.
Yeah, like I said, I just and this we've had a number of these. There's no good answer for the Panthers.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
He's trapped. I don't know how he gets out of this trap. So if I, from an organizational standpoint, what I would do is I would either draft Willis and sit and wait on him to do it, or I would trade that pick into next year's draft.
Well, I think that the real issue is that most teams right now do not value the top end of this draft.
It's a problem for all these. I think the Giants would trade down for sure. I think the Jets probably would trade down.
I think what you try to do is give the Steelers a relatively like a basic, because trading back is almost always positive, for the trade back team. I think you give the Steelers basically like a sweetheart deal to trade from 20 to 6, and you pick up you pick up less than what you normally would in a normal year, but that's all you kind of got. And the Steelers love Willis, and I think that's really what you do. The teams that are stubborn and don't trade back because they're not getting as good a value this year are going to miss out.
It's going to be really, really interesting. Like I've got Willis going to Pittsburgh anyway at 20.
Yeah.
But is that? I think everybody's going to know that they're going to want him, so somebody's going to jump right in front of them. That's going to be the way that it's going to play out. Giants' second pick, I did go Sauce Gardner for that one, and they've got to find a replacement for Bradbury anyway. And the thing I love about Gardner over Stingley is that Gardner's this jam at the line of scrimmage guy. So I'm back to my 2.5 second throwing the ball in this league. So believe me, as a receiver on the other side of it, if a guy gets a good jam on you, generally the quarterback's looking to the other side of the field. And so, but he also, has a little bit of that Darrelle Revis kind of thing where he's gonna take away your inside with a hard jam. If you release outside, he's 6'3", so we've got a little Richard Sherman thing going too. So instead of him trying to chase you, he's now going to take an angle down the field. So you're going to release and do a little loop. He's going to turn and sprint to the 10-yard marker, and he's going to meet you there.
Yeah.
So even if you get burned on the release to the outside, he's just going to cut you off, and then at 6'3", go ahead, throw a jump ball. I'll take my chances.
Yeah, he's kind of like the peak of what Xavier Rhodes was, right? Like a big physical guy who could anticipate really well. The obvious issue with that is what happened with Rhodes is if physically you lose it, it's hard to play corner that way. But I think your point about NFL football now is absolutely correct. You win in 2.5 seconds,
or you lose.
Yes,
yeah.
And to your point, if you can get a quarterback to go to his second read in the first 2.5 seconds of a play, you win. Statistically, you are the bookmaker, and he is the better at that point in time. So that's kind of I like that reasoning with Gardner.
All right, so now we're going to Atlanta Falcons. The Atlanta Falcons aren't winning anything anyway, right? Yeah. I mean, there's just no way. They're not getting rid of Matt Ryan and coming back with Marcus Mariota and go, oh, we're knocking off the Bucs this year, baby. Let's go. It's just not happening. So I went Jameson Williams here. If you don't care that much about this year anyway, and I don't know where Jameson is he going to play? Is he going to be a factor? But I do know out of this class, this kid is different. Yes. I mean, you average 20 yards a catch on 78 friggin' catches. That's unbelievable. I mean, he had speed that really was sort of unique in this class. He's not a big guy, but I do think he's a route runner. He knows how to get in and out of routes. He gets his body down low. He knows how to change speeds. He's has explosive intent after he catches the ball. I really, he's got nice little double moves to help him to go with that speed. I don't think he's going to be what he was for Alabama this year coming back.
The Falcons don't need that.
I
They're
don't care.
Sink. Yeah.
I don't care. I'm going to bring him back in the second half of the season, cut him loose, let him learn a little bit, and then I'm finding a quarterback next year.
Williams is plus 175 to be the first wide receiver taken. Garrett Wilson of Ohio State is currently the favorite, but there has been a ton of money on Wilson. He was as high as 8-1. And now, so there is some steam there. I think this is a great pick. If he doesn't get injured in the national title game, I think Alabama wins by 2 scores. Like, he was that important to that team. And, when you look at his film in the SEC title game, running away from the best college defense we've seen in like a decade, there's some value there.
And the sad part about it is the play he got hurt on was a bad throw. If the guy leads him across the field, which is where he was going, he walks in the end zone. And now he's like makes an awkward catch and then tries to make a move. And I was sad. I was like, God dang, what is that? Yeah. Seattle. I get to Seattle, and I know Pete Carroll. Deep down in his soul, he wants to play defense and run the ball. And so at that point, you go, all right, no Russell Wilson. They're going to go back to their roots, right? In my mind, I would take Kenyon Green here, but I don't think Pete's going to do that. I think he'll take Ike Ekwonu, take the mauler, take the guy that's going to beat somebody up. And because it's not all about pass protection for Seattle and for Pete. And this is, I think the offense will fall back in his lap now. Russell Wilson, Carroll was under tremendous offense to let Russ cook and all that kind of stuff. And I think now he's however many years he's going to stay coaching, I think he's going to do it his way, and I think they're going to go Ike Ekwonu.
Let Russ Cook died in one of your games, which was at Arizona on Sunday Night Football in 2020 when he threw that interception to Isaiah Simmons. Let Russ Cook died on the vine there, and they've been trying to recreate it, recreate what they've done before. Rashad Penny last year averaged like 6 yards a carry. I think that makes Pete Carroll very happy, independent of how it makes me feel. But this is one of the they've been mocked Trevor Penning here. They've been mocked Jermaine Johnson here. They've been mocked one of the quarterbacks here. They could do a lot worse than Ike Ekwonu. So I don't hate this one.
Penny, I really liked him coming out in the draft, and then he just never did anything. And I was like, I just missed that one. But I'm glad to see him doing something again. The Jets. And this is the one that I think is my favorite, or one of my favorite fits. As you're doing a mock draft, you go, oh, this makes total sense. I think Drake London from USC is the perfect guy for Zach Wilson, because now he doesn't have to wait for somebody to get open. He's going to learn. In the NFL, you have to learn to throw it to people that are covered. That's a really hard skill set to learn. In college football, if you're open by 3 yards, you get the ball. In the NFL, if you're completely blanketed and you're Drake London, you're going to get the ball. He has probably the most extraordinary catch radius that I can remember coming out on a guy. He's going to play that X receiver so that you have 2 choices. It's a whole league right now. You get an X receiver, and either you double him and take him away, or you leave that safety in the middle of the field and you throw a one-on-one jump ball.
Yep.
Drake London's going to be a bitch with that one-on-one jump ball.
Yeah. I mean, Aaron Rodgers made a career out of throwing the ball to the correct shoulder of Jordy Nelson, right? And with Wilson, you're right. Wilson had developed so many nervous tics last year, right? And you saw it when they beat the Bengals, where you put in Mike White, and it's just like, if the guy just hits the check down, right, he's fine. He hits the check down. The guy was so screwed up mentally by the middle of the season. And I have my questions about London. I think as far as separation and stuff like that is concerned, it's hard to, the Josh Doxsons and the Quan Treadwells and the J.J. Arcega-Whites. It's not, there's not a great track record here, so you're betting on London being different than all these guys. But giving a quarterback as many outs as possible. You have Corey Davis being kind of the get open guy, Elijah Moore similarly, and then you have the tight end Ozama from the Bengals. You're starting to give Zach Wilson a chance, and I don't think he gave himself a chance last year, but I also don't think the Jets gave him much of a chance. So I like wide receiver here to the Jets.
He's has a little more wiggle, a little more ability to get inside than you typically see for a 220-pound guy. So at least you've got to be able to run a go, and you got to be able to run a slant at that X position. Those are the two you just have to be able to do. Washington Commanders, they get Carson Wentz, Martin Mayhew, Ron Rivera. Here we go. I gave him Garrett Wilson. I think that, you bring Wentz over, you've got to give him a chance. And the thing that I love about Wilson is I think he has a little bit of the Cooper Kupp double wiggle moves. He's not a one move at the break point kind of guy. He's a wiggle here and a wiggle there and creating separation. I think he'll give him some separation. And but he also, he's got the 4.38 speed to go with it. Olave to me is much more of a straight line glider sort of a guy. I just thought Wilson was more creative in getting open.
Yeah, and with Terry McLaurin on year 4 of his rookie deal, you have to sort of add up Is he
coming back? Is McLaurin coming back?
I think he'll play this year for sure, but he could be. He could be 4 and out for that team. And you get Diami Brown in the draft. You had Curtis Samuel in free agency. Like you sign him here, and now you don't have to overspend for McLaurin.
Yeah,
even though McLaurin's a fantastic player. But
all right, now the news I think you're going to like. First pick for Kwesi in Minnesota and Kevin O'Connell and those guys. I have Stingley falling to here. Now, I know that's probably wrong, but probably goes to the Commanders right in front of them. There's one of those when you're doing this mock draft, as soon as you do it, you go, oh, man, that's probably wrong. But you just live with it anyway. But I'm still it makes me nervous when you're 2 years removed from your best football. And he's had fewer than 600 snaps the last 2 years, and I think there's potential greatness there. I think he's going to be comfortable with the press man, coverage. But would I feel good about taking him 3rd overall? I wouldn't.
He was the most valuable defensive player in college football in 2019, but as you said, the last 2 years haven't been as good. The Vikings, they got Patrick Peterson back. They have Cameron Dantzler from a previous draft. 2 years ago, Jeff Gladney was their number 1 pick at corner. He's now on Arizona because of legal issues. So this is a position. Look, if Kwesi has read anything we've done, right, and he has, you got to get depth at cornerback, and this is buying the dip on Stingley. If Stingley falls this far, this is one of the best value picks of the draft.
I agree, and whether he goes, I could see him going Seattle 9. I could see him going Washington 11. I could. He could end up in Atlanta. They could pair him and, end up with a great. So he could easily go to the Giants too. So, to me, he's like one of those swing guys. He's going to go high. I just don't know where.
Can we pause for a sec? So, yeah, obviously, Austin, your son went to Notre Dame, played safety there, right? Mm-hmm. Jack went there. Kyle Hamilton is like a top player he was number 1 on our board for a while. I think he's he's not number 1 anymore because of the testing and stuff. Washington's a team he could go to. Minnesota's another team he could go to. His fall has been really interesting, right? Because on the field, the guy's the best player in the draft, I think.
He is going to have the most expensive 40-yard dash of all time. It's going to cost him so much money. And because when you know what I think it was, and this is one of the things I wrote down for him. I had him going to Philadelphia at 15. that it was stunning for all of us that actually watched the tape, that you watched him and there was no question he was going to run 4.5, at least 4.5, right? There was no doubt. I never saw him not get there. The FSU game alone, is insane. But when he didn't get there, when he ran the 4.6 or 4.7 or whatever the heck he ran, you started to question yourself. And I think the first round is where you get killed if you are a GM if you draft somebody and their times weren't good and it doesn't
That ends up
work
showing
out.
up.
Then they blame you.
Yeah.
How can you not see that? Even Joe Schmo out of Queens saw that he ran 4.6, and you can't play safety at that speed. I have my theory about long-legged guys because I was one of them. The 40-yard dash is not built for somebody 6'4".
Well, our own Mike Renner, another Notre Dame grad, he looked at the flying 20, which is basically, you cut off the 20 time from the 40 time, and his speed is just as good as Louis Cine, the guy from Georgia. So, another long-legged guy myself, it just takes a while to start. Now, I guess the question becomes, and he was injured, so that's a big thing too, but, the only question I have with respect to this is you have access to the best trainers now, right? And so to have your start of your 40 be a problem, that the only red flag is could you get that resolved by having the best trainers available to you as somebody who's a top 5 pick? But
maybe, but it's Usain Bolt. If the 40-yard dash determined the fastest man in the world,
he's not. Yeah.
He wouldn't even be close.
Yeah.
There'd probably be thousands of guys that could beat him, and yet in the 100 or in football, which to me what matters in football is sort of the 20 to about the 45 or 50. So about that 30-yard, because you're never running full speed. You may accelerate out of your start, but then you're going to hit some glide, and then it's going to come down like Terrell Owens. I don't know how fast he ran the 40-yard dash, probably 4.5.
Jerry Rice ran a 4.65.
But when
got caught.
When Owens opened up, it was. Did anybody ever catch him? No, they never caught him. Nobody ever did. Yeah. There's a couple of long-legged guys in this one that never got caught either. So anyway, we'll get on to that. Houston, Devontae Wyatt, defensive interior from Georgia. It's 6'3", 304 with the kind of first step that he has. I mean, people, they literally miss him. It's the problem is, what do you have, 400 snaps in the last couple of years? But that's playing on this damn Georgia defense, which was all these guys. I wonder if everything was set up for Devontae Wyatt to get the sack. All the games, all the things. How many sacks would this kid have? I mean, he is 304 pounds and moves like a beast and can run. He has a great little corner. I put down he corners like a sports car. He can come around at 300 pounds, and then when you lose the edge on a guy that size that can also accelerate, what part of your body do you think is going to stop that once it gets even with you? Yeah. You're dead. You're dead. I think that if Houston could end up with him with 13th pick, I just think it'd be fantastic.
So they go, Ross Blacklock was a defensive tackle they drafted recently in the second round, and they go with Wyatt here. That's, you're starting to build things there, which is better than you can say the last couple of years for that team.
I just, at some point I put down when a great player falls, I just go, I don't care who's on the board. I'm going to just do this. I got to Baltimore, and, I thought their corner play kind of fell apart last year, but I couldn't get off of Jermaine Johnson. I just think that he kind of fits that. He's such a hammer on the edge, and I could see him just sitting over the tight end and just hammering this tight end, trying to get off the ball, and then they try and run strong side, outside zone runs at him, and he just hammers the hell out of that. And he still, runs under 4.6, and he's 6'5" frame, and he doesn't look as twitchy as some of these other guys, but I think his just pure hustle and work ethic, he's going to fall into second try sacks, and he'll end up with 10 sacks most seasons.
The interesting thing, Martindale out, right? Martindale got a lot out of kind of low pedigree edge players like Matthew Judon and Pernell McPhee and guys like that. Last year was Tyus Bowser kind of doing the everything role for them at edge, and then they had Adafe Owe as the draft pick. This would be another one. They play a lot of edge players though on that defense. The interesting thing is Mike McDonald, now the former defensive coordinator for Michigan, Aiden Hutchinson, right? So you kind of sort of make that connection between the hustle, kind of stand-up defensive end that can rush the passer. Johnson, there's a lot of steam for him going in the top 10. I think at 14, it's okay. I'm a little concerned about the fact that his only productive season in college came when he was 22 years old. You know, that's a little bit of and a lot of
he had to leave, right? He left Georgia,
Yep.
which makes you a little concerned too. Like, yeah, that's a great defense, but
it wasn't like an all-world defense when he had to leave, right?
Right.
It was this year. And then the other tricky thing is a lot of the steam on Jermaine Johnson is Senior Bowl related, which is kind of, you know, that worries me a little bit when when that is the reason a guy's being taken high.
I just think I think he's physical enough that you're never going to go, oh, that was a bad pick. I just don't think so. We talked about Philadelphia and Kyle Hamilton.
Good pick,
you know, that's
they lose Rodney McLeod. They have him with Anthony Harris. I think that's a good.
I just think that's a cornerstone. You just start building defenses around that. New Orleans Saints, I saved my favorite, Kayvon Green, for them to play left tackle. I know a lot of people are going to go, it's a guard. And I don't think so. I think that he has most of these tackles that I watched in this process. I thought they were all guards. This to me is the last. That's not true. He's the last good tackle. And there are other tackles. There are other sort of finesse-y players out there. But one of the things that really impressed me with him was that when he got to the second level, he had the ability and he had the feet, despite running like a 5.24. He's not a great runner, but he had the feet to stay on blocks on the second level. And that is really hard to do. Those athletes in the NFL at that second level, generally they just sort of dismiss a lineman trying to chase them and get them. He could stay on those guys, and he's the perfect 2.5 second. I can stay in front of you with my feet. Got it.
Well, and Sean Payton, who is now gone, but a lot of his fingerprints will be there. Sean Payton was the king of turning OK linemen into stars by 2.5 second plays.
Yeah, I watched him against Alabama. He could displace people in the running game at 325 pounds. I think that's the hidden gem of the whole draft right there. Now I started getting into things that I didn't love. I think Chris Olave, so the Chargers are next, and I go, okay, I'm starting to run out of guys I love. But Olave, I think, is a good player. But so many of his big plays came against the lesser teams that they played against, and he was running through zone defenses, and, he just didn't make anybody miss when he had the ball in his hands, the way that some of these top-end players did. He's not the feisty guy. He's just smooth. He's a number 2, and the minute that you forget about the number, you double the number 1, he's going to run a deep over, and you're not going to be able to catch him, kind of things. But I also am kind of a believer, if your best player is your quarterback, just keep loading up on people around him. And I don't love the pick, but I'd put Olave there.
The interesting thing here is the Chargers don't have a ton of needs, right?
Yeah.
I mean, they went out, got Sebastian Joseph Day, so Jordan Davis is not necessarily a factor here. They do have Williams and they do have Allen, both on $20 million deals. Right tackle's an issue for them, but there's not really a right tackle.
I didn't think there was either. I just didn't think there was.
I think this helps him. Like, look, this is a very good value pick. If he ends up being a great third wide receiver for them, it's worth the money at 17, I think.
So Philadelphia Eagles, back to them now. And I just kept thinking back to their Super Bowl years, and they're another one of those when the front four is good, they're good. And Jordan Davis at 6'6" and 341 pounds with a great first step, and guys can't cut him off on inside zones or outside zones. I just think he's a unique guy. It's always hard when you got somebody who's 341 pounds and runs a 4.78 to pass on him anyway. But it is also hard when they're only going to play half the snaps. I mean, he's, if you get 500 snaps out of him, it's great. But I look at the league now as a soft, coverage kind of league. And so on first and second down now, instead of having 7 in the box, you're going to have 6. And this guy he's not a 2-gap player, he's a 3-gap player. I mean, he can help shut down opponents' running games almost by himself and allow you to play the extra guy back.
Yeah, absolutely. And the Eagles, without a lot of talent in the secondary the last couple of years, especially last year with Gannon as the defensive coordinator, like we're very vanilla, right? And I think this helps them play that defense where it's like you don't have to have the extra men in the box. Their linebackers have never been good.
It's San Francisco. Yeah. It's Robert Saleh. I think that's the Eagles for years have tried to find cornerbacks and make it work, the New England way, playing some man coverage and all. I think this is a better path forward for them. But anyway.
Yeah.
All right, here's one that I kind of struggled with a little bit. So I got the tackle for the Saints with their first pick here. And now I'm down to their second pick at 19. And I took Jalen Petrie, the safety slot edge rusher, whatever the hell he is from Baylor. The fastest way for me to describe him is sort of Troy Polamalu-ish. He just throws his body around everywhere. It's 4.46 speed. He can rush the quarterback. He can play in the box. He doesn't play back a whole lot, but he's fast enough that he could. The only flaw I had with him was that he's just too aggressive. He wants to make every friggin' play, and sometimes he'll jump a route and leave somebody wide open for a big play down the field. But he just screams football player, and it's somebody that you'd like to build a team around. So I probably put him a little higher than maybe some do, but he's just one of those guys that I just like that guy.
Yeah, Dax Hill is kind of like similar player that I think a lot of people are mocking in the first round. New Orleans, they had the retirement of Malcolm Jenkins, right? That's kind of the player that they're looking, kind of that inside defensive back type of player that they're really looking for. I don't hate that pick at all. I think New Orleans is looking for impact players. You come out of this draft with a player, if you're going to use him at tackle, at a premium position in Kenyon Green and a premium position now, which is inside defensive back in Petra.
You really bring up a good point. Daxton Hill is the kid from Michigan, and I kept looking at him, and of course they ended up, they would do so much with him as well. I kept thinking, what if you just put him at free safety? He was running 4.38, and what if all he did was make sure you didn't hit one of those two outside deep shots, or he could just run with somebody down the field, because he can do all the other stuff too. He's a tough guy. I think he can play in the slot. I think he can do a lot of different things for you. That sort of versatility has real value in the game. But I mean, he would blow up those wide receiver screens. I mean, he's a tough kid. But I just kept thinking the idea that he could be a free safety when you needed it made me almost flip-flop, but I just like Petrie so much. Yeah. I just like his style of play.
Is cool. So now we're on the Steelers, and we get
who I've got. Yeah. I've got Willis somehow falling to here. I truly don't think it's going to happen. I honestly had not thought about Pittsburgh trading up, because I thought that they might look at this, and it's possible Willis is gone with the second pick, or the sixth pick.
Well, I see similarities here with Mahomes, right? Like, not that I think he's as good of a prospect, but at the time, like when the Mahomes thing started, Andy Reid was not that bashful about his affinity for him. And, when he was the 25th projected player, everybody's like, oh, this is a great connection. And then everybody sort of like got hot and heavy on Mahomes, and they had to move up to 10, right? Willis, I think, Mike Tomlin, who's I think going to be the coach there for a while, has been a Hall of Fame guy, very similar to Reid, like made his affinity for Willis known. And, Willis's draft stock has kind of climbed. Now, it's not, I don't think it's, Mahomes' draft prop in 2017 was 16.5. Willis's is 13.5, right? So the market believes Willis is going to go around pick 14. I think, it's hard to predict trades, but I think there's better than 50% chance the Steelers are going to move some size of a mountain to go up and get Willis.
Or somebody will.
Yeah, or somebody will. But I think Pittsburgh is going to be – Pittsburgh, like if you're sitting there and you're at 13 and you're Houston and some team calls you and says, we're going to trade up for Willis, you call the Steelers, right? Like I think that's – you call the Steelers and say, hey, this is what New Orleans is offering me. What do you got? And I think like ultimately the Steelers will do what it takes.
Yeah, probably so. It's going to be an interesting transformation of that offense, that the way they were playing with Ben Roethlisberger at the end of
If you could even call it an offense.
Right? I mean, but they were just catching it and throwing it, and that is the last thing that they're going to get with Willis. So to some extent, it's the Steelers going back to what Ben was, holding
When
the
he
ball,
was great.
stiff-arming him, people and the whole thing. New England, I just feel like they've got to go corner here with J.C. Jackson, Stephon Gilmore no longer in-house, and McDuffie from Washington I had as the next best guy. He can be a little grabby on the routes, may need the boxing gloves to train to keep from holding. I love his change of direction. Probably a little bit more of a zone guy, and that makes me somewhat nervous because I don't think that's really who the Patriots are at their core. But I also see McDuffie as a guy who could make that switch to free safety at some point if they need it.
They did that with Devin McCourty when that was necessary, and they did kind of shift to a more zone defense last year without Gilmore. Like I think they freely let Jackson go. McDuffie slides right in there for them.
Green Bay Packers, I really debated this one. So I was going to take receiver. You got Jahan Dotson, Treylon Burks, Christian Watson, all still hanging in here. I took Sky Moore. I think Sky Moore has some Julian Edelman kind of traits to him. Big ass hands, catches it, has nasty intent with it after he catches it. And I was trying to go, okay, well, I can get Sky Moore later, or I can get Jahan Dotson later. So I think Jahan Dotson is going to end up being a slot player more in the NFL than what he was at Penn State. But there's something about Sky Moore that he just brings a fight and an attitude to the position and an understanding that I went backwards. Ordinarily, you think, all right, I want an outside guy, and then I want the inside guy. But I was afraid both of them would be gone by the time that we got back to it. And I just don't think they're ever going to regret taking Sky Moore. I like his style, his attitude.
He didn't return punts or kickoffs at Western Michigan, but also one of the things that the Packers have historically struggled with as well is the return game. Like they've been one of the worst special teams. And I think that there's a little bit of added value to a player who has his sort of skill set as well. But yeah, this is a good, dependable. I mean, the one thing we know about Aaron Rodgers is like he values dependability in the wide receiver position.
It's exactly right, and he's with Devontae being gone, he's going to have somebody that he trusts. Like I would use the word trust when I talk about Aaron Rodgers as much as I would use any other word. And I think the only I don't say that. I think Jahan Dotson and Sky Moore are the two that he will develop a trust with the fastest and give him answers when he's in trouble more so than any other. I almost put Dotson in there. I just kind of fell in love with Sky Moore, so I went that way. And then I turned right around for Arizona, and, I probably should have gone edge or something, with this. But for the same reason, I took Jahan Dotson next. And I just think that as you're looking at Kyler Murray without a Larry Fitzgerald, you just need an answer. Sometimes he needs quick answers in the passing game and not just take off and run every time that he ends up doing something. But as far as a little guy with a catch radius, I mean, he's unbelievable. Some of the catches Jahan Dotson made last year, and he runs 4.43, and he played outside. He really wasn't a slot. And when I was watching the Ohio State and Michigan games, Penn State just kept getting the ball to Jahan Dotson. It was like they're like, screw it.
And that's with bad quarterback play. Like they did not have good quarterback play. And, like when you think about, wide receivers at the NFL level, college to pro, can you separate and can you track the ball? Right. And like Jahan Dotson, I got to get this number properly, but he's like 96th percentile in terms of winning against single coverage. Right. That's a huge trait. And to your point, I think about Penn State, Wisconsin, right. Sean Clifford, couldn't hit the broadside of a barn, right, in that entire game. But then, when they needed a big play, the guy just dropped back and hoped that Jahan Dotson could get open, and he chucked it up. And
it was Cooper Kupp. He was Cooper Kupp in the biggest games for Penn State.
95th percentile separation percentage on target.
And big hands for the cold weather, and not Jahan Dotson. I'm thinking of Packers. So then I go to the Cowboys, and this got hard too. Like, Arkansas, Jerry Jones, the whole thing. So I couldn't, and they got to replace Amari Cooper. But Treylon Burks is another one of those big body guys, 6'2", 225, that, okay, yeah, he doesn't look fast. He didn't time fast, but he never got caught either. And he's playing in the SEC. And my problem is that I've got to put him at X, I think, because it's the same sort of thing, jump ball, contested catch, all that sort of stuff. Do I feel comfortable moving Gallup into some other role? Because that's traditionally been his role, the deep ball out of the X position. So this may be a bad pick. I kept, and I would have plugged a guard in there, and maybe to help him. I just don't like the guards. I just didn't like them.
Yeah, Zion Johnson of Boston College is kind of like mocked here, but I think Burks has the Arkansas connection. Plus, receivers nowadays are here to complete groups, right? Like when you were drafted, you had to be everything, right? Like in the 80s, you had 2 wide receivers that had to be everything, and you brought a little guy in to play in the slot on third down, right? And now, like these guys have to complete groups. CeeDee Lamb can play the slot, Michael Gallup can play the Z, and then you have, Burks can play the X, and that's a pretty damn good group, especially now that you have, Dak Prescott on a pretty heavy deal, right?
I kept trying to like Zion Johnson. I'm not even sure I like him in the second round. I just didn't think he was athletic enough to do what he needed him to do. Buffalo Bills, I took Andrew Booth, the cornerback out of Clemson. He's coming off that core surgery, but I thought of the top 3 corners, he was about as tough a guy as you could have. A lot of violent contact out of him. Plus, they've got issues in the secondary. Levi Wallace now in free agency. Tre'Davious White coming off the ACL. This is, they need corners.
Yeah, and this gets us to 4 corners in round 1. The betting markets have it 4 being kind of the most frequent number. So that's kind of interesting given that we still have a few picks left.
Tennessee Titans, I struggled with this one too. I think that Trevor Penning is the guy that, he's 6'7", 325 pounds. He's got this great move where he pulls down one shoulder pad and he pushes up on the other, and he literally pins guys to the ground, and he's just nasty, and he's not happy until you're on the ground and he's humiliated you. He's a little clumsy in pass protection. But Chris Henry, and who cares? That's not who they are, and he probably is a guard. That's probably where he has to play, despite his size.
Yeah, from Waterloo to Nashville. I think the only issue for me with him, penalties, just a lot of penalties, which is tough to do from the 1AA or the FCS. 16 penalties last year.
I did not have a high grade on him. I just started, I'll be honest with you, I started running out of guys that I really loved here to play. I'm going to go back and watch a few more big guards and see if I can find one I like. Tampa Bay Bucks, this one I struggle with too. I just got down to the best player available. I couldn't believe I haven't taken Devin Lloyd off the board yet. I look at Levante David. He's a great player. He's getting older. Maybe he ends up. And probably the thing that I love most about Devin Lloyd is his pass rushing skills. He's like Mr. Wiggle. I mean, they can't block him. Backs cannot block him.
That's the biggest thing, right? So when you think about Lloyd, the value here for him is the Parsons pick from last year, where you have a guy who can be kind of a Lawrence Taylor's maybe a little heavy, but like that kind of player. And Todd Bowles traditionally has been able to use multiple stand-up guys back through his time in Arizona. He hasn't really had to in Tampa because he's had so much talent in Tampa Bay, but this helps.
All right. Get back to the Green Bay Packers. The best players I probably have on my board right now are linebackers, running backs, and safeties. The wide receiver is an interesting pick. I really think they need to take 2. If I've got Aaron Rodgers, I don't give a damn. I'm just giving him as
and he's being paid everything.
Yeah,
and
you
so
got to give him
know
a
that
chance.
That's part of the thing.
You got to give him a chance. So here's my question: I think Christian Watson is a guy that has the skill set, 6'4", 208. Runs 4.36, played at North Dakota, North Dakota State, whatever it is. And so he has all the measurables that I like. And he has these incredible plays where he blocks 3 people. You could watch their offense. It's like they just tried to get him the ball in any way possible. They hand it to him, they would throw it. I mean, he was a better athlete than what he was playing against on the field out there. He also looked a little nervous at the catch point. And if you bring him in to be Marquez Valdez-Scantling and cut him loose,
Yes.
when they throw that 50-yard pass, you have to catch it.
And I think that's the big thing is his drop rate was
Way too high. Now, I will say at the end of the year, he seemed to settle in a little bit. I thought his confidence grew towards the back end of the season. But, God, I don't want him to be Cordero Patterson and this guy that you love all the measurables. And then, he ends up a running back, at the tail end of his career here.
So I actually don't hate, I'm much more of a quant than I think a lot of people. And I think about, these draft picks as assets, which, maybe isn't the best, always the best thing to do, I guess. But when you look at Sky Moore, right, the guy that we took, earlier on, 6 drops, 3 years at Western Michigan, right? You have the dependability there. You have
and it shows when you watch the tape. It shows.
Is there really that big you're taking 2 guys here? You really need one guy to be great, right? And the other guy to complement. You don't need to if you're the Packers and you say we got to come out of this first round with 2 great wide receivers, your expectations are out of whack, right? The way that it works is you take 2 wide receivers. One of them has certain skill set, dependable, predictable. Maybe not necessarily as high of a ceiling. You take that guy at 22. Then you got this other guy who's got a lot of flaws but has a much higher ceiling, and that's your portfolio of wide receivers, and you just deal with it. And if this guy's undependable, chances are Sky Moore is going to be the guy, and then you come out of this fine.
And would you consider all like a George Pickens here, the Georgia kid?
I texted one of my friends in the league. I said, what do you think of George Pickens? And this person almost never says anything nice about a player. He goes, really good player. I think the issue is a lot of the interviews and stuff have not been great for him. There have been rumblings so his pick number is 36.5. A lot of people like over that because of the character concerns. But Pickens is a much more polished receiver than Watson is. It's just the question about, coachability, things like that. And I know the Green Bay receiver, and I don't pretend to watch Pickens block, but the Green Bay offense requires their wide receivers to buy into the whole gamut of plays, right?
Well,
and
Watson will. And Watson definitely will. Thing. Yeah. So now we're down to your Kansas City Chiefs. And I am still loaded up at linebacker. And a little bit of edge rusher too. And running back, but they're not taking a running back. So let me just hit you with a few guys here, and see if you want any of these guys. Have you of the edges remaining that we still have on the board here?
I think there's a really easy one, actually.
Oh, good. Give it to me.
So for one, I think linebacker is going to be tough for the Chiefs. They just used 2 consecutive second-round picks, and they're a nickel team. So,
right.
You don't really want to have a guy, taking away from your previous picks. George Karlaftis of Purdue, to me, if he falls to this part to Kansas City, I think that they should be really happy. In our projection system, he looks really good. He tested well. He was productive at Purdue, despite being really the only defensive lineman on that team who was any good. And he's kind of the Steve Spagnuolo edge player, where he can set the edge, and he's big and
he is definitely that.
And the Chiefs, Frank Clark got 1 pressure in the AFC title game against the Bengals, and he's been terrible.
Do you think Karlaftis will do better than that? That was my concern. Was to me, this is a really tough call from the standpoint of, agreed, he's big, he's tough, he's physical, he's going to pound on people, he's going to set the edge, he's going to do all that. But I just don't know if athletically he's special enough to overtake some of these other guys in here. And I know the Jabo, got hurt. Boye Mafe, guy from Minnesota, you probably know. Even like Bonita from Oklahoma.
Drake Jackson from USC is a good athlete.
I mean, like, do you want that pounder or do you want that potential just fly around the edge guy?
Here's my take on Kansas City. They need a wide receiver, but they don't need a wide receiver nearly as bad as they need edge. They need a corner, but they don't need corner nearly as bad. I almost, like, if you came away from 29 and 30 with 2 pass rushers, I would not be upset. And if one of the pass rushers was more of a, Karlaftis is more of like an above average athlete, not a freaky guy, but above average, 92nd percentile in vertical jump, 78th percentile broad jump, 50th percentile in 40. If you end up with him and then sort of more of a high ceiling guy like an Arnold Ibikite or Drake Jackson or something like, I'm perfectly fine with that. The Chiefs, if you roll the ball out tomorrow, the Chiefs have no one that can rush the passer from the edge, and that includes Frank Clark. So that to me, I think you need, like, they need somebody maybe with a lower ceiling but a higher floor at edge, because they that's their Achilles heel. They cannot rush the passer from the edge.
Could they go 2? Could they go one hammer with Karlaftis and then go another one of those guys that just pure speed, and or would, like, I still think that Elam out of University of Florida is a cornerback that can play. Like, I would, because he's coming off a knee injury, and I thought the tape from his junior year was much better, and he comes back and he looked a little. I thought he was protecting his leg a little bit.
Yeah.
We were just watching him. Year 2 out of that, he could be a really nice player, and if you got an edge in a corner, that wouldn't be a bad result. They got back-to-back picks there.
Yeah, I think that, or, I know that they replaced Tyrann Mathieu with Justin Reed, but like Tyrann Mathieu's sort of more of that Daxton Hill type player, right? And that could also help them in the secondary. They have not used in the Steve Spagnuolo era anything higher than a 4th-round pick on a corner. They believe that if they have great safety play, they can sort of mask deficiencies at the cornerback position. So that's also an option. Like, they could go wide receiver here, but I also think that they like Dotson. And if he's gone, then maybe they just go edge or edge defensive back.
And potentially they could go safety corner. They could go Hill and Elam. I mean, any of those things. I guess it just depends on how they feel about Karlaftis. I would be afraid I would end up with another guy who really could hammer the edge and end up with 5 sacks. And I would want a chance of something bigger than that. But anyway.
What do you think of Boye Mafe? Was another guy
I liked him. I liked him. Yeah. I did. I tried not to, because I know there's some questions about him, but I think that if they went edge, he would 100%. In my way of thinking, I would take Mafe probably over Karlaftis, just because I would want the upside. And again, I'm right back to the only thing that matters: can you impact the passing game? I don't care if you can set the edge. I just don't care. Like, I need 10 sacks. You tell me a guy who's going to get me 10 sacks.
Well, this is your draft, so we'll go Mafe because you prefer him, and then what do you?
I would go Elam. I would.
A Gator.
Another Gator right there. So I'm going right there with Boye Mafe.
Now it's your Cincinnati Bengals, 31.
This is interesting here.
Can you remember the last time that the Bengals didn't have a glaring need on their roster? Because that's currently their situation. 1988, the Super Bowl. You guys were coming off a kind of a bad 87 year even, but when the last time you made the Super Bowl. You look at the Bengals, what do they need?
They don't need a ton.
Depth is probably the biggest thing.
A Karlaftis kind of guy might really fit the Bengals, just as a versatile piece, that you could do a lot of different things with. So I don't, I could also see him taking a shot at like a David Ojobu.
Yeah, just because they don't need him to play immediately.
Exactly.
And he can be high end.
That if one of those guys, is there somebody that I just like that's coming off an injury that people are going to shy away from? The other thing that I always hear a little bit about, and another one are those inside linebackers. We haven't even really hit on that. Let's do that for 1 second here, just as a part of this exercise. Let me get back to all these guys. But it really would be an opportunity. So Lloyd I've got gone, but Nakobe Dean out of Georgia is a really good player. It's almost like you got to distinguish. He's number 17 for them. Great blitzer, coverage, smaller kind of guy, 229. But he has the ability to put some pressure on the quarterback. And if he runs, I never saw a 40 time on him.
The medicals for him, like and I'm a betting man, I'm betting he doesn't go in the first round
because of the medicals,
but also like the testing issues.
Because if he runs 4.5, which I think there's at least a remote chance
he plays like he runs a 4.5.
He does.
Yeah.
If he runs 4.5 and can play man coverage the way that he does, there's a spot for him in the first round. If he runs 4.65,
don't you think the Bengals are kind of? I mean, I'm actually pretty proud of the hometown team by how they built their defense in a very PFF way, which is like,
believe me, I know. I've been watching them.
Throw a bunch of assets at the secondary, kind of skimp off at linebacker, and you end up with, I mean, they get the Gaither guy, and then they got Logan Wilson with the big interception. Or no, Gaither got the interception in the Raiders game. So you have two linebackers who are very functional players later in the draft. Like, I think it would be out of character for them to use premium draft capital on a linebacker.
Would they go another safety at this point?
Well, so Jesse Bates, he has not signed his franchise tag, right?
So so they now know what the dollar figure is going to be to sign him. And there are really good safeties left in this draft too.
Yes, and Von Bell is a good player, but not like,
right.
Von Bell is a good player because Jesse Bates is a great player, right? So you get somebody in there. I mean, so Dax Hill could be one. The guy Seen's great too. The other guy that I really like, who's going to be a value to a team in round 2, is Jaquan Brisker of Penn State. I think he's a very good player. I actually think Jaquan Brisker, if you look at like the metrics and stuff, compares really well to a guy like Kyle Hamilton. So
he's absolutely sort of that tone setter on the defense. He was basically a box player or a slot player. 165 snaps deep was all he did. But he does have the speed. I mean, he could there's a lot of guys, Daxton Hill we've talked about, that sort of position.
The Bengals really can't go wrong here, and that's like the position they put themselves in by hitting on a young quarterback, hitting on premium players like Jonah Williams and then the 3 wide receivers, and then using free agency money and hitting on Trey Hendrickson. Like when you look at the Bengals, they've gotten a lot of crap over the years, but like they've made a lot of good bets of late, and that's put them in a position where it's house's money for them right now.
Yeah, it would not surprise me to see them either go edge or free safety at this point. I'm actually going to give them Daxton Hill just because I've been wanting to put him somewhere, and I think that at the very least you push the needle in your negotiations with Bates, and so
it's a 3 safety league anyway, right? So, that puts you in a position where you have a lot of outs.
And finally, now we're going to get down to the Detroit Lions with the last pick in this draft.
I know where you're going on this pick.
You absolutely do, right? I mean, this is their opportunity to me to hit the home run. I mean, I think they're going to pass on Willis in the beginning, and I think they're going to go Sam Howell, and they're going to feel like they got the same guy with a little bit more of a proven passing career from his junior year, but all the physicality and the respect that a Tim Tebow kind of leader is going to bring to the table, because he just runs his ass off and it just throws his body around and just doesn't care. But when he does throw the ball, like, I think we're going to have to go through the same thing that we do with Malik. Let's read one half of the field. Yep. Don't be afraid to run. That's okay. But Sam Howell to Detroit at the last pick, to me, just goes, damn it, they just won the draft.
The thing with Howell that is underrated aspect here is he has the running ability that gives you a really high floor for a rookie quarterback, right? He's a much better athlete than I thought we all gave him credit for going into the year. They lost Diami Brown, they lost Javonte Williams, they lost Michael Carter going into the year, and the offense struggled as a result. But I don't think it was because Sam Howell took any like legitimate steps backwards. I think it was just, he was an incomplete product who was really good when he had a bunch of weapons and then struggled when he didn't. And that's okay, you know, and he doesn't have to play right away. And if he comes in and beats out Jared Goff, then the Detroit Lions are in a really good spot.
And I look at them not only running from the quarterback position, but I think he's a sort of classic RPO kind of quarterback with really quick resetting of his feet, but a good, nice release. One of the things I'm going to pick on people this year is I think sometimes these guys have been overcoached from these quarterback gurus, and when I see people take the ball and flip it upside down and extend it away from their body, Dan Marino never did that. Joe Namath never did that. You go back and watch some of these old films. Nobody's ever done that, playing the quarterback position. So now these edge rushers are coming around the edge, swatting it out of their hands.
That's the only thing defenses can do now to win. Is to create turnovers.
I'm like, who the hell are teaching these guys to flip this ball upside down and extend it from their body? So, but I think that Sam Howell is very coachable, fairly tight release. Brings a lot of things. I really do think that he will have a chance to be something, and it wouldn't stun me if Ritter was the choice here either. But if they can get a quarterback at 32 and not have to take Willis at 2 and get Hutchinson or whoever falls to him,
if Hutchinson falls in their lap at 2 and then they get the third quarterback prospect in this draft at 32, that's a pretty good haul.
That's a pretty good haul. Well, we shall see. My prediction is I get fewer than 5 right, because I think the top end of this draft is going to be such a free-for-all. Everybody's board is going to get shuffled. Yep. But I'm going to stay with my bet. My early bet was Travon Walker. I take a lot of heat around here. I think that Aiden Hutchinson is the safer play, but I don't think that is Trent Baalke. I just don't think he's the safer play.
He doesn't have the
guy.
incentives to make a safe play.
Yeah, I just don't think it is. So, Eric, it's always a pleasure, bro. Thank you, and we'll see you tomorrow night.
Yeah, it'll be fun.